Let's talk about the fall of a titan. 23andMe, the company that was once the face of the whole personal genetics revolution, well, it's bankrupt. But this is so much more than just another tech company going bust. This whole situation brings up a pretty terrifying question. When a company that holds your DNA goes under, who gets to own your most intimate code?
To really get what's at stake here, you have to understand the sheer scale of this thing. I mean, just a few years back, in 2021, 23andMe wasn't just doing well, it was a phenomenon. It was valued at a staggering $6 billion. Millions of us were buying these kits, right? We were curious, the marketing was slick, and it felt like the future.
Fast forward to today, and that $6 billion valuation, well, it's a distant memory. The company has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was kind of the perfect storm, really. Consumer interest started to fade, and then came a devastating data breach that just completely shattered public trust and sent the company spiraling. And the collapse was shockingly fast. I mean, look at this timeline. In 2021, they go public, big deal. By the end of that same year, they hit their peak at nearly $6 billion. But then, 2023 happens, and the floor just drops out. A massive data breach specifically targeted and exposed the data of customers with certain ancestries. Now, that wasn't just a technical screw-up. It was a fundamental violation of trust that when you combine it with an already saturated market, well, it sent them into this death spiral.
But honestly, the company's financial failure isn't even the biggest part of this story. The real issue, the thing we really need to talk about, is the asset it's leaving behind, the genetic information of 15 million people. And that raises the central question we have to tackle.
So in a normal bankruptcy, right, assets like office buildings and patents, they just get sold off to the highest bidder. But what happens when the most valuable asset isn't something you can touch? What happens when it's literally your DNA? Who gets to buy it, and what are the rules?
Now, publicly, 23andMe insists that any buyer is going to have to follow the law. But as legal expert Anya Prince points out, the real rules aren't in some big federal law, they're buried in that long privacy policy you clicked agree on without reading. Yeah, that one. And that document, well, it likely gives the company and whoever owns it next really broad rights to use and share your data.
To really understand the stakes here, we have to kind of rewire our brains about what genetic data even is. It's not like your email address or your shopping history. Your DNA isn't just about you.
The concept is called relational data. And it's pretty simple, really. Because you share DNA with your family, your choice to upload your genome isn't just a personal one. It affects your parents, your kids, your second cousins, people who never signed up for anything. It basically casts this huge genetic net over your entire family tree.
If you want to see the astonishing power of this relational data, look no further than one of the most famous cold cases in history. For decades, the Golden State Killer was a complete ghost. Police had his DNA from crime scenes, but it never matched anyone in any of their criminal databases. The trail was absolutely stone cold.
So, investigators got creative. They took the killer's DNA profile and they uploaded it to a public genealogy website called GEDmatch. This is a place where, regular people and hobbyists shared their genetic data to build out their family trees. They weren't looking for him. They were hunting for a relative. Any relative. And boom, they got a hit. Not a close relative, not even a second cousin. They found a partial match to someone who shared a great-great-great-great-grandparent with the killer. Think about that. A single person who probably just uploaded their DNA for a bit of fun had just cracked open a 40-year-old case. From that one tiny genetic breadcrumb, investigators and genealogists built out these massive, sprawling family trees. And eventually, they zeroed in on one man, Joseph James DeAngelo. He had never, ever submitted his own DNA to any database, but his relatives had. And that was all it took.
So the Golden State Killer case proves this data is unbelievably powerful. But that power, it cuts both ways. So you'd think, surely there must be some ironclad laws to protect it, right? Well, the reality is a lot messier and, frankly, a lot more concerning.
So the main federal law on the books is called GINA, and it does give you some really key protections. For example, your boss can't fire you, and your health insurer can't drop your coverage because of something in your genes. That's great. But now, look at what's not protected. A life insurance company, a disability insurer, or a long-term care provider. They can absolutely use your genetic info to deny you coverage or charge you way more.
Okay, you might be thinking, what about HIPAA, the law that protects my medical records? Well, guess what?
It generally doesn't apply to direct-to-consumer companies like 23andMe. Plus, HIPAA has this huge loophole for what's called de-identified data. But as the Golden State Killer case proves, genetic data can almost always be re-identified. So you end up with this leaky system where your most personal information can just flow between companies and researchers with almost no real oversight.
Now, this really shaky legal ground becomes downright terrifying when you add the next layer of technology into the mix, artificial intelligence. Because with AI, we're not just looking at where you came from, we're trying to predict where you're going.
A key tool here is something called a polygenic score, or PGS. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Instead of looking for one single knockout punch gene that causes a disease, AI scans thousands of tiny little genetic nudges all across your DNA. It then adds them all up to create a single score that predicts your statistical risk for something.
And we are not just talking about your risk for heart disease. I mean, look at this. Researchers are already building scores to predict deeply personal and complicated stuff. Things like educational attainment, your IQ, and even your predisposition to things like aggression or addiction. This creates a massive risk of a new high-tech version of genetic determinism. See, an AI can't easily tell the difference between a genetic trait and a social one. For example, is a certain outcome caused by your DNA or by things like poverty or the quality of schools you went to? The AI might just lump it all together, creating this dangerous and, frankly, false impression that our entire destiny is hardwired in our genes from the day we're born.
So, all of this brings us right back to the immediate problem. The 23andMe bankruptcy. For the 15 million people who trusted this company with their most personal information, what can actually be done right now?
Well, thanks to various state privacy laws, many of you do have the right to request that your data be deleted. The process is usually pretty straightforward. You log in, you find your account settings, and you look for the option to delete your data and your account. Now, this is really important. You can and you should also request that your original biological sample, your spit, be destroyed.
But, and you knew there was a but, right? There is a huge catch. Deletion is not a time machine. If you ever consented to have your data used for research, a de-identified version of it might have already been shared with pharmaceutical companies or other partners. And once that genie is out of the bottle, it's pretty much gone forever.
So we're left with this fundamental conflict. On the one hand, this data can bring justice and cure diseases. The potential is immense. But on the other, we're gathering it all in a sort of digital Wild West, with technology that's moving way faster than our ethics. The collapse of 23andMe isn't just a business story, it's a massive warning sign. It forces all of us to ask, in our rush to unlock the secrets of our DNA, what are we willing to risk, and what is the real price of all this progress?